Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Eric Landrum, along with Garth Neufeld, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the end stuff. This is episode number 60, where Garth had the opportunity to interview Amy Fineburg from Jefferson County Schools in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, before you hear the interview, please allow me to share some listening tips and some of my favorite moments. Please do subscribe to us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts because that helps us pop in the search results. And while you're there, your ratings help us too. So, I enjoy every podcast recording, and of course I enjoyed this one too. But this one's a little bit different. There's not as much backstory here. I think that's just because Amy and Garth have quite a bit of commonality in their history. They've participated in a number of national initiatives together. And as they closed the interview, they talked about having Amy back on again. And I certainly agree that we need to do that. She did talk about her job as a program specialist in the Jefferson County School District in Alabama. I loved hearing about what she does day in and day out because she's not the typical or the classic high school teacher, community college teacher, or college teacher. So she really has a great job from my standpoint, at least, in terms of facilitating teacher training and supporting other teachers as well as students taking online courses, AP courses, dual enrollment students. And so it was really interesting to hear. She did talk a little bit about her backstory, but that really wasn't emphasized too much. What I think is really fascinating about this podcast interview, and I need to think about it more, and I would love to hear Amy talk about it more. Amy growing up in Birmingham and now teaching in Birmingham and being a leader of national organizations like TOPS, like BEA, and now STP, that cultural centering of her life influences how she wants to provide leadership on national levels. And I think that, by the way, that's to the benefit of STP. So hearing her talk about her background at the beginning of the interview was really informative as she's talking about what might be some of her presidential initiatives in STP at the end of her interview, when she's talking about the valuing of diversity, the valuing of diversifying membership in STP, because it's not just about bumping numbers of people from minority status as members of STP. It's more about the valuing of these different attitudes and people that that aren't in the majority, and really making it a meaningful addition to our community. And I think I think she has that perspective because that's the perspective of the culture she's grown up in because of her surroundings. And so I think that lens is a really interesting one that I think comes out in this interview. I think part of that also comes out because of her background growing up and then, looking around at her options of going to college. And she talks about that in the interview as well. She goes to Samford, and there are two faculty members, and that was a really interesting dichotomy. The two faculty members have training that are pretty opposite. I don't want to spoil it for you. I want to entice you to listen. And then around her junior year, someone that we all know really well in the teaching of psychology world, Stephen Chu, arrives at Samford, and she audits a course with him, and she is greatly influenced by his teaching style. Although, I should say, her entree into the teaching of psychology world, I think she credits really to Charlie Blair Broker and Randy Ernst. And so there's just all kinds of great experiences that she shares with Garth during this interview. They talk about some of the more current work with the national standards, with the High School Psychology Summit that just happened a couple of seasons ago. And I just really enjoyed hearing Amy talk about her professional pathway as from undergraduate years, how she became interested in psychology, becoming a teacher of English with that intention, and how she transitioned to a high school teacher, and then how her path twisted and turned in really interesting ways. I want to leave you this one interesting tidbit to listen for towards the end of the interview. Amy gets interested. She has this research idea that she gets interested in exploring, and she says to herself, and I'm paraphrasing here, if I'm going to do this research about this topic in teaching, I might as well get something out of it. So guess what? She does a dissertation. So she's teaching in the high schools, and then she goes back to college. She goes to Auburn University and earns her PhD while she's a full-time employee teaching at the same time. And she does it over a 7-year span. And I think that's just remarkable to be able to do that. And I know others in our field have done that as well. And I think they're equally remarkable when they do that. And so I just love that notion of, I'm going to do this research. I might as well do this other thing too. By the way, there's a lot, doing the research and doing the research on top of taking all the coursework that it takes to do that was really quite a bit of work. And so I really, truly hope that you enjoy this interview as much as I did.
Welcome to Psych Sessions. This is Garth, and I am with Amy Fineburg. And Amy Fineburg, Jefferson something. Go ahead.
Jefferson something, where I work.
Yeah.
I work for Jefferson County Schools. I'm the advanced program specialist, so I work with AP, dual enrollment, and virtual learning programs for a district that has 56 schools and 35,000 students. So
Okay, so we have to stop right there, and you have to slow down and tell me again, maybe like when you go into the office on Monday, What are you up to?
Oh, goodness. I respond to a lot of emails. I support schools. Our superintendent believes that there are two kinds of employees in our district, those who teach and those who support teachers. So I am in that support teachers role with the district. So I work with schools to set AP policies around exams and what courses to offer. I also facilitate teacher training to get them equipped to help students. I analyze data so that we can know whether our students are being successful. I do all of those things as well with our dual enrollment programs. We have 10 post-secondary institutions that work with students in our district. So I coordinate getting students enrolled and taking courses and making sure they're successful there. And then we also run both full and part-time virtual learning programs. So I'm enrolling students in those, monitoring their progress, making sure that their needs are taken care of.
Virtual learning for high school students?
Yes, they take courses online in a variety of subjects. Some are taking it because they are almost using it as their homeschool school.
Sure.
So they do full-time virtual learning. We have a lot of students who want to take courses that either our schools can't offer, they don't have the staff to offer, or the interest from enough students to offer the course. We also just have students who want to take extra courses or can't fit a certain course into their schedule because they are active doing other things. So I kind of help make sure that the pathways for students to do these things are available and they can explore these interests during high school.
Is virtual learning an online class?
Yes. It is an online class.
Does it use a learning management system?
Yes.
Which one?
We use a company mainly called Edgenuity, and our state also has a program called Access, where Alabama teachers are teaching online courses in addition to their in-person courses. Okay. So we there are a couple of options that students can use in our district.
Huh. Did you always think that you would end up in this kind of administrative role?
Yes. No, I did not think that at all.
Uh-huh.
I started college thinking I would be a therapist, but then realized pretty quickly that I probably didn't have enough empathy for people's problems to be that way. I grew up with a kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps and suck it up kind of mentality, and so when I was an RA in the freshman dorm in college at Samford, and and the girls would come and tell me their problems, and I'd find myself going, you just need to get over that and move on. And I remember during one of those conversations thinking, this is probably not a quality a good therapist would have. So I heard that you could teach psychology in high school, and I thought, oh, I think I'd be good at that. So I changed my major and became a psychology teacher, and that's what I thought I was going to do the rest of my life. And then as I grew and evolved as a teacher, I realized that that I could use psychology to help education get better. And so that's when I started kind of pursuing administrative work and trying to help people apply principles of psychology to their teaching and learning.
Right. So now you're in this position that is bigger than psychology, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, do you oversee all
Yes.
high school education?
I oversee all AP dual enrollment and virtual learning for every subject, every discipline, and really grades 6 through 12. So yeah, my job now is way bigger than just teaching high school psychology. Mm-hmm. So it's much more applying psychology to education than teaching psychology right now. I try to pick up adjunct instructing courses
Sure.
Here and there when they're available, but yeah, in general, I'm doing more work to help teachers do their jobs better,
Yeah.
and trying to help them see how psychology can fit into helping them achieve that goal.
Right. So let's give, for people who don't know you, let's give some background. You live in Birmingham, Alabama.
I do.
And did you grow up there?
Mostly, yes. I was born in upstate New York. My mom is from Buffalo. My dad played professional football. He was a Buffalo Bill, and he met my mom in a bar. They met and married in 6 weeks, and 2 years later had me. And I'm the oldest of 4, and we moved from Buffalo to Houston. My dad got traded to the Oilers when I was about 9 months old. And so I've lived south ever since then, and in Alabama for the most part since kindergarten, roughly. So I consider myself an Alabamian.
So who what's your dad's name? We need to Google him now, right? Everybody?
Richard Cheek. He
Richard
played
Cheek.
college at Auburn. And
Really?
yeah, he did.
How does
He
that sit
did.
in the old
Oh,
family?
it's fine. I got my doctorate at the University of Alabama, which,
Yeah.
if you are not familiar with football, that's a big deal. And I never got any degree or anything from Auburn. And so when I went to get my doctorate at Alabama, I told Dad that I was going to convert to Alabama, and he gave me his blessing. And and we're fine. We just don't talk about it too much.
Oh, that's
No.
funny.
A couple of weeks ago, the university honored former players, and we all went down and
To Auburn?
Yeah, we all went down and spent the day with Dad as he, met old players and things, and it's a big deal for him and our family. So I'm not an Auburn hater at all. I'm
yeah.
not one of those Alabama fans who hates Auburn. I actually have a lot of affection for what the university did for my dad and how it supported him through the years.
Yeah. Not a bad teaching of psychology crew over there at Auburn University
Yeah,
either,
not bad at
historically,
all.
right?
Yeah, not bad at all.
Man, it's like Alabama's a hotbed of psychology teachers.
Right. Yes, we are.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell us culturally, like, what is, because, and if you don't, we can edit this out if you don't want to talk
Sure,
about it, but
no.
what does football mean in Alabama? Because it's,
Everything.
it does. I know, you just lit up right now.
Yeah.
I'm from the middle of Canada. Talk to me about it.
I don't know why it's such a big deal. I really don't. But it is. I think some of it has to do with just the long tradition of success that Alabama and Auburn have had over the last 50, 60 years. And then I think just it's almost like, you've got brother against brother, in houses. We joke about how when people move to the state, they have to declare which university they're going to pull for. And there's just a lot of, I think, familial and cultural togetherness that happens around football. People tailgate together. It's at the risk of denigrating a state I love. There's not much. I don't think there's necessarily been much else to do because it's rural. There are a lot of farming communities in the state, and so gathering around this cause, either Alabama or Auburn football, it's just ingrained in families, and it's kind of what you do socially. My brother-in-law and sister have, he's been a part of a tailgate, I think, for the last 25 years. They meet at the same place. They have traditions and rituals that kind of bind them, and it's just kind of what they do and who they are. And it's lovely to see, people kind of bonding over something. It gets pretty heated, especially during Iron Bowl time when we're playing each other. My husband is a professor at UAB, and recently UAB's been doing well in football. And I do really wonder why people don't come down to Alabama and figure out what we're doing with football, because we have 3 teams that do really, really well. And we've had teams on other levels that have won national championships. And people talk about Texas football all the time, but I think in our state, we have something figured out about that game.
Yeah.
And so for whatever reason, it's our thing. I wish, things like quality education and good quality of healthcare were other issues that we paid attention to, but it is something that really binds us all together.
Oh, that's cool.
And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, your people, they land far away, and they are. It's like they have forgotten that they're not in Alabama anymore.
Right.
But yeah, I have good friends who are big Alabama football fans, and you know who they are. Pretty quickly.
I do. Yeah.
So let's talk about you grow up in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in what that is like, because it's such a rich, a culturally rich area.
It is.
So, and this is just my interest, so we can talk
Sure.
about whatever you want, but this is
Sure.
what I'm interested in. What's it like to grow up in Birmingham?
It's complicated, if I could distill it down to that. It's a great place to raise a family. People are very neighborly. People are very warm and open. They would give you the shirt off their back. But it also is a place where people hold some pretty deep prejudices, and that has given us a pretty famous history of racial violence and tension that I think actually in the last 5 to 10 years, the city and the surrounding communities from the city have decided to embrace rather than fight, and recognize how we can move forward. Mm-hmm. So growing up in Birmingham was this kind of tension that surrounded racial and socioeconomic issues. Having my children grow up in Birmingham, I think has been a different experience where there's more willingness to talk about racial issues, more willingness to talk about reconciliation and truth around our racial history. Mm-hmm. So it's a city that I think is coming into its own here lately, but taught me a lot about how to navigate difficult conversations with people from different backgrounds.
Well, I was just going to ask, do educators in the area, do they have to have this skill set to be able to navigate these things in the classroom?
They should. They don't always.
Uh-huh.
And I think that is a primary tension that teachers in my district have and in the surrounding areas. In Jefferson County, which is the county that includes Birmingham, there are 12 different school districts. The 2 largest are our district. Jefferson County includes most of unincorporated Jefferson County and some municipalities that have not broken off. It includes Birmingham City, which is a large district that's mostly African American. And then there are these small city districts that have pulled out of the bigger districts for various reasons. And the main reasons being they're wanting local control over their, tax money to spend on their students. And for a lot of the districts, it was because of, wanting to pull out of perceived racially charged or tense circumstances. And so there are communities that, the demographics have shifted in various ways throughout the last 60, 70 years. And not all of the teachers in those schools have been able to transition with that, with those changes. And so I would say a primary tension that we don't always talk about are, I'm teaching students who may look different from me. How do I teach them, in the best way possible? And for teachers, sometimes they don't possess those cultural competencies that we want to make sure they have in order to reach students who are different from them. And so that's kind of part of discussions that we have on our district level are, how do we help teachers, either develop or be aware of these cultural lenses, these cultural differences that are getting in the way of persisting with students as they struggle or what have you. And it's a journey, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of factors and variables that come into that sometimes I think keep students, especially students of color, from achieving. And our district in particular in the last few years has been kind of having to discuss that out in the open. We had a city school system, a mostly white city school system, that wanted to pull out of the district. But we were under a desegregation order that started in the 1960s. And their pulling out would have created an impossible situation for us to get out from under that order and show that we are teaching all students in the same way. So we fought that and we won.
Legally?
Legally, yeah. Almost went to the Supreme Court, but the parties settled prior to that. And so now we're trying to work with the Justice Department to come out from under that order and show that we are educating all students the same and not in a dual system. And so we're having to have those conversations around, are we teaching all students, white students, students of color, in equitable ways? And we're being honest about the fact that we're not always doing that, and putting together plans to work on that. And part of those plans are around cultural awareness and cultural competency.
So you get to be, in your position, you get to be a part of these conversations.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm leading right now a book study with faculty about race and equity. We're reading Beverly Daniel Tatum's, or Tatum Daniel. Oh, I always get her names backwards. I think it's Beverly Daniel Tatum's book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? She's a psychologist, and over the last few years, as I've led book studies with faculty around different issues related to equity and culture, I've been able to bring in psychologist perspectives, and helping people see that APA has resources to offer training and support. Psychologists have, books authored by psychologists are helpful. So that's been very rewarding to kind of help get the word out about how psychology can inform our teaching and learning, and especially around issues related to diversity.
I like how you said earlier that you aren't teaching psychology anymore, but you are using psychology in your role. And I bet, I'm assuming that most of that is like undercover. not explicit. Although you're kind of an explicit person, aren't you? Yeah.
I'm pretty out in the open with it, but I do probably take every chance I can get to say, psychology can help us with this.
Right.
But yeah, it's not a primary explicit role that I have. Yeah. It is my pushing in with my education, my training, and my experience into my work to make sure that what people are doing is based in psychological science.
Yeah.
There's an emphasis in education, especially K-12, around using evidence-based practices and research-driven strategies. And so to me, from what I've seen out there, the best strategies and practices come from psychological science. And so when people bring in, hey, let's try this, I'm like, well, hold on. Here's what psychology says about that practice, and let's do this. Let's talk about mindset. Let's talk about race and culture and cultural competency. Let's talk about retrieval practice and things like that, and trying to make sure that what we're doing does have that piece that's grounded in research.
Isn't that what we want, though? Even like not in your particular situation, though you're doing a great job of it, but isn't that what we want of any student who takes a psychology course? Mm-hmm. We want them to grow up to be the kinds of people who say, I think psychology might have something to say about this.
Yes.
And if we could just get that into them.
Right. I think for students of psychology, I think that we want two things for them. We could want two things, but we at least want one of two things to happen. We either want them to fall in love with it so much that they want to do it for a living. So they want to become a psychologist, broadly defined. Or we want them to appreciate it so much that they become a better consumer of psychology, either out in the media or in talking with people or seeing applications in their work, or in the very high likelihood that they or someone they love are going to need psychological services in life. They would be a good consumer of that. So as a teacher of psychology, yes, I want students to walk away either loving it so much it's what they want to do, or at least liking it enough that they use it to walk through life more effectively.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to mention a couple things that I know about you professionally, and then I want to go back and try to figure out kind of what your path was to those things. So you are now, you're going to be president-elect of STP.
Yes.
In about 25 days.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fun. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You also co-chaired the high school summit a year and a half ago.
I did.
The APA High School Summit. So you've held and are continuing to hold all these leadership positions in the teaching of psychology nationally. So I always think when you find somebody there, it's really interesting to find out how they got there. So, and you have a really cool kind of backstory too. It intersects with some people, and so let's start there. First of all, which high school did you go to? Because I know it's important in Birmingham. So I don't know that it'll mean anything to me, but which one is it?
I went to Hewitt-Trustful High School. Okay. I think they offered psychology, but I didn't take it in high school. So yeah, I did not. I had no interaction with psychology until I went to Samford, and that was the first major I declared, and that was it.
So tell me, I think most Americans in your kind of a position might leave home to go to college, like leave their city.
Yeah.
And tell me if I'm wrong.
I don't know. I think the research actually shows that people stay within 50 miles of home. And I will say, I grew up poor. Okay. I didn't realize how financially strapped my family was until I filled out the FAFSA. And realized that, wow, my parents didn't make a whole lot of money. So I credit them immensely for not making us feel as poor as we were. But when I told my mom I wanted to go to Samford, which is a private institution, and not Auburn, right?
Yeah.
Mainly, I wanted to go to Samford because it was smaller. I was actually not very confident as a high school student, and I thought I'd get lost at Auburn because it was so big, and so I'm like, I want to go to Samford. At the time, I was like, I want to go in the ministry, and
Samford's
a Baptist institution. And my mom looked at me and she said, well, good luck paying for that. And I went, okay, I'll figure it out. And so I applied for scholarships. Samford did give me some scholarships, and I cobbled together a little more, and then the rest were paid with loans. So back to your point, research actually shows that lower income students tend to stick close to home because they still feel a responsibility to help their families.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I literally was about 30 minutes away from home.
And what's the
college.
option if you don't get the funding for Samford? Is it community college? Is that the option then? Is it
for me? It probably would not have been community college. I had a pretty good ACT score, so I knew that I probably wanted to go to a 4-year school. I could definitely get into a 4-year school. UAB would have been an option.
And there were scholarships out there.
Right.
Okay.
Or Auburn, probably. Yep. But again, UAB and Auburn at the time, for me, were just too big. I couldn't imagine myself in an intro class with 150 people. I couldn't imagine how I would survive. I was not very assertive. I was not a very good self-advocate. So I knew I needed a smaller environment, and really once I had my mind on Samford, I was able, I just figured out how to make it work, and
that's an amazing campus. It's
beautiful.
Yeah, it's really
beautiful.
I could see that you. I would guess that you had a great 4 years there.
Oh yes, it was a wonderful time. I grew a lot. I grew and gained a lot of confidence in my abilities to get things done and to learn. And I had wonderful professors who nurtured and mentored me throughout in several different areas, not just psychology.
So you start as a psych major, or you take...
I did. I started as a psych major, and
thinking I'm going to be a
therapist. Yeah, and then realized I did not have the temperament to be a therapist.
Right.
So, and at the time when I got there were only 2 professors in the psych department. One was a behaviorist, and one was a Freudian. So it was like whiplash going in between them. I'm not sure they liked each other a whole lot, and I think they respected each other professionally, but I mean, behaviorists and Freudians just don't see eye to eye on psychology,
right.
And so we got all sorts of.
So you just hold on. You decided to be a psych major before you ever take a psych class.
Yes,
okay,
I did. Well, because I wanted to help people.
Yeah, sure.
I gave great advice to my friends. I was one of those psych students who was like, oh, my friends tell me I'm such a good listener, so I'm going to be a therapist. Yeah, that's not. Yeah, that's.
But it got you in the door, in the psychology door. So, did you prefer one of these professors over the other?
I probably actually preferred the behaviorist, but the Freudian was fun. So, she was more personally charismatic than the behaviorist. The behaviorist was very straightforward. In fact, I'll never forget the first class I took from her, like first day of first intro psych. She's talking about all the requirements for the course, going over the syllabus, and telling us about journals and saying we need to go read journals and we need to go find the journals in the library. And I raised my hand and I said, what's a journal? Because to me, a journal was a diary. And so I was like, I'm sorry, what's a journal? And she went in then to a 10-minute tirade about how kids today aren't ready for college. And I thought, oh my goodness. Like, I was almost like, okay, do I quit now? Or do I figure out how to navigate this? And I chose to figure out how to navigate it. And that was good in the long run.
Do you think your peers knew what journals were?
I imagine some of them did, but I sure didn't. And, fortunately I'd had teachers in high school who truly did believe there was no such thing as a stupid question. And so they were open to that. And, but she was not pleased that I did not know what journals were.
And she was the Freudian, right?
No, she was the behaviorist.
Oh, she was the behaviorist.
She was the behaviorist. Okay. Yeah. So, we just kind of went back and forth between them in classes until 1993 when Steve Chu came to campus. And
so you are what, a junior?
I'm a junior.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm really actually getting close to the end of my coursework. And I really actually didn't have any reason to take any courses from him, but I'd heard he was good. And I'd heard him present about his vision for the department, and I was impressed by it. So I audited his cognition class, and it completely changed everything for me about how I thought about psychology, because he was just such a good teacher and a very experiential teacher.
So you guys have this long relationship now, but can you go back to that Amy back then and say, like, and I think you just said it, but maybe just tell us about what was it like? What flipped for you?
Yeah, so he taught in a way that was completely different from most professors on campus. He taught by having us engage with the material. Most of the other professors were lecturers, storytellers, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that approach. But the way Steve taught was, if he was teaching about memory, he would have us do memory demonstrations. I remember him taking us through Ebbinghaus's procedure for learning the CVC words, and he would make us do that, and then make our own charts for how many words we were remembering, for the 7 plus or minus 2 concept. We would memorize strings of letters and numbers, and it was like we were seeing if the psychological principle worked on ourselves, and for the most part they kind of did. And then of course he's so smart, and you're sitting there listening going, man, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he lives this. So I'd never been engaged like that before, and
at some point in that class, you start thinking teaching?
No, I was already an education major. I was already going to be a teacher.
Okay.
I was resigned to the fact that I would probably teach English and hopefully teach psychology. But during Steve's class, I was like, man, I really hope I get to teach psychology, because this is how I want to teach it. I was then, upon graduation, fortunate enough that the teacher at the high school directly across the street from Sanford retired, the psych teacher. He had been teaching, Tommy Norton. He had been teaching there for 23 years and had a pretty good, scientifically based course, which at that time was kind of rare. And I was able to just walk in and take over his program. And I remember sitting there going, okay, this is really happening. I have to teach intro psych. I haven't taken it for 4 years. I'm just going to do what Steve did. I'm just going to do what Dr. Chu did. And so that's how I structured my first course, was around active demonstrations of psychological phenomenon as much as I could. I probably lectured way more than I should have, but when there was an activity, I would do the activity. So
was that an AP Psych program?
At first, no.
Okay.
It was not. He had. I remember him Mr. Norton telling me, in the kind of interview phase, and when they decided to hire me, he kind of oriented me to what was, his program, and he said, I probably should teach AP, but I'm just too old for that. I'm retiring. I have no desire to learn that. So if you want to do it, I'm sure they'll let you. And so about a year in to my teaching there, they they let me offer AP, and that's when I started. So around 96, 97 is when I offered AP psychology at my school.
How many sections were you teaching?
I taught 2 sections of AP, two sections of regular, and then I had an English class. You
got it all.
Yeah, I had it all.
Wow.
Yeah.
How fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was a great time. Just a great time.
Wow.
And very, very, very lucky to be in the right place at the right time with the right skill set.
Right. Good. I'm glad you said all that. I'm monitoring my Eric voice in my head that says, is this person trying to not take credit for something that happened to them? No.
No. I was in the right place at the right time. Mr. Norton was retiring. I just happened to graduate with the right credentials. And I was able to walk into this really nice situation. And I really was fortunate that Mr. Norton, Tommy, had been teaching a more scientifically based course, because I very easily could have walked into a situation where they were doing, mental hygiene and talking about serial killers and dream interpretation, which, as I continued to teach, several of the surrounding schools were doing that.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate that I could walk in and inherit a quality program.
Well, let me channel Eric here, because I think that what he would say to you would be, no, you worked very hard. Mm-hmm. You audited a class. You probably were very invested in your education. And I like what you said earlier, that you had the right skill set because you developed the right skill set because of probably people and teachers in your life,
right.
but also your hard work, right?
Right.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
There was a lot of pulling.
It's just such an awesome story. I hope it's not lost on you how great it is, particularly just to where you are today as such a leader in the field. So.
Yeah, I do think most everybody's story is that combination of grit and, call it luck, call it providence, call it whatever. But opportunities are presented, and you have a choice of accepting it or not. And part of the luck is, do you get to be offered the opportunity? But then part of it is, do you accept it and then deliver? Mm-hmm. Because then once you deliver, other opportunities then start coming your way. So it's usually a combination of those factors.
Yeah. Did you take AP high school classes?
I took AP English,
AP
literature.
English. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you take this new job on,
mm-hmm.
it's only a couple of years before you bring in an AP psych class. So what motivates you to not just keep it as a high school psychology class, but to add AP? Because
I benefited from taking AP.
Okay, that was it.
I think really actually I earned a 4 on the AP Lit exam. And it was really actually at that moment when I got that 4 and realized that I was going to be able to skip freshman English at college, that I realized that maybe I was good at this school thing, and that maybe I could achieve some good things. And so it was this moment of like, wow, wait, I'm kind of good at this, because I just kind of downplayed my my abilities. I think I probably had some fixed mindset thinking back then. I wasn't ever very good at math, and I think that kind of permeated into other areas of like any success you have in high school classes is just because you're lucky, right? But that literature course, I was like, wow, I did that, and it's benefited me, and I wanted students like me to have that opportunity. And I knew that Psych 101 is a required course for most people in the gen ed, part of getting a college major. And I thought, well, this would just be wonderful if more kids could learn this. And even if they don't get a qualifying score, this will be easier in college because they've had
No
it
doubt.
before. I mean, it just seemed to me like a no-brainer that kids who were college bound would want to try to take psychology. I think I realized very early that it was really a gateway course to other AP opportunities, and it could inspire confidence in students, and I wanted to kind of pay that forward to my students.
Do you remember teaching the AP course significantly different than your psychology
Not
course?
Not at first. Eventually I did.
How does that look? I don't know. I don't know if I've had this conversation with somebody who does both.
So for me, in my process, it became a difference in what I expected the students to bring to class. So with my non-AP students, I would still assign portions of the chapter to read and things like that to read before class, but I would kind of walk them through things a little more, and I wouldn't get into the weeds of some of the more complicated information like action potential and things like that. I would mention it, but it would be less know all of these details. So my AP students, though, they'd need to read, and I would hold them accountable for that reading prior to learning, and I would have them bring more to the conversation than me. I became much more of a facilitator of learning because they had to be responsible for that. So it really wasn't necessarily too much about content, but it was about their responsibility for their learning. That was the main difference. They had to do more independent work.
Yeah. And how did you develop? I'm sure you, and I think you've said as much, that you were developing as a teacher and able to and coming to a place where you're probably thinking more in a more sophisticated way about learning and what should these students learn versus what or expectations, those kinds of things. How did you develop as a teacher? What were the things that helped you? Did you have support? Were you having conversations? When did you get in the national teaching conversations?
So my student teaching cooperating teacher was a woman named Barbara Gajewski at Vestavia Hills High School. And she was an alternate state teacher of the year. So she was very, very good. She taught AP psychology and regular psychology. And when I went to her during student teaching, she said, there are two things you have to do. One is join TOPS. Two is go to an NSF workshop. And I said, yes, ma'am. And so as soon as I became a teacher, I joined TOPS. And I started, looking for what is this NSF workshop business, because she went to one of the ones at Texas A&M with Ludi Benjamin, Charlie Blair-Broker, Randy Ernst, that Carol Dean, that crew who were there, and so in '97 they came out with the NSF workshops at Northern Kentucky University. Charlie Blair-Broker was a co-director with Perilou Goddard. And so I applied for that. It was a month long in the summer. So it was like crazy commitment that I could have only done at that point in my life when I didn't have children and, I was still young and woohoo, let's go to adventure camp. And so I did that, and it was phenomenal. In fact, that was the summer before before AP psychology, before I was teaching AP psychology, and it was great. It was experiential learning, just like Steve Chu did, so that was very validating. We actually conducted research, which was just awesome. Really helped me see the value of students going through that process. So that was a strategy that I incorporated into my teaching. Of course, I met Charlie and Rob McIntarfer and Mike Sullivan. These people who were just phenomenal teachers, and it was, I just kind of had the time of my life. And then 2 years later, Charlie calls me out of the blue and invites me to be one of the small group leaders for the 1999 institute. And I was just so floored by that. Like, okay, of all the people for the past 2 years that you've had come to this workshop, and there were phenomenal teachers there, you're calling me? Like, I'm 27 years old. I'm barely been teaching, 4 years, and you're calling me to come lead people? Like, that was another one of those validating experiences. Like my AP score in high school, it was like, oh, wait, I could lead other teachers on how to do this. And so, so I did that. I met Randy Ernst at that session. And in talking with he and Charlie, their first questions were, are you going to run for TOPS, and are you going to apply to be an AP reader? And I was like, yes, I want to do those things. What do I do? And they gave me mentoring and guidance around that. And so I went to be an AP reader, and that then became this phenomenal experience in my life. Randy and Charlie were working with Marty Seligman on positive psychology and invited me to come along to develop teaching resources. And let me tell you, as a 28, 29-year-old teacher sitting in Marty Seligman's living room talking about how to teach positive psychology, like, oh my gosh, like I really tried not to fangirl too hard, right? Because this is a guy I've read his research. I taught about learned helplessness to my students, and I'm sitting in his living room.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And I wrote the first positive psychology unit plan for TOPS, and it just kind of, I applied to run for TOPS, and I won. I mean, what? Like it just these kind of series of validating and circumstances that really were spurred by people saying, you should try this, you should be open to this opportunity. And then me being able to take that opportunity and deliver.
Yeah.
It just set me on the path to bring me where I am today.
I have two thoughts. I think that there are these people who are like, who have been at it longer, who have a really good sense of looking at younger folks as saying them. Mm-hmm. They're the next ones. Mm-hmm. And our field does a really good job of that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I'm thinking about is that I think we all have the story of that one door that was open for us. Yeah. And those are important stories to tell. And yes. I suspect the leadership invitation by Charlie is probably one of those doors.
Oh my
for you.
goodness!
Was
yes.
it the door for you?
It feels like it was.
Yeah.
It took me to a different level of engagement because I think had that not happened, I probably would have never tried to do TOPS. At least not run for office. Like that felt bold. My imposter syndrome probably would have kept me from doing it for at least a longer while. But having someone like Charlie go, you shouldn't think that you can't do this because you're young or because you haven't doing it long enough. We need people. We need people who will do the work. And you seem to be that person. Go do it. Okay. Yes, sir. I'll go do that. And so, yes, I would say Charlie calling me and asking me to be a small group leader set me on a path of opportunity that I don't think I could ever repay him for.
Hmm. So you become an AP reader, and are you continuing to show up to lead these groups with NSF? Is it NSF?
Yes. No, the NKU Institute ended 1999 was the last year. Okay. And I don't think NSF has funded any since.
Okay.
Which I think is kind of a tragedy because leadership in psychology, in high school psychology, really came from those institutes for a long, long time. That was actually one of the goals that Randy and I had when we were co-chairing the high school summit last summer was we need to have an experience where we bring people together and cultivate the next generation of leaders.
Yep.
Cultivate people who have the energy and the interest and the vision to take the work for the next 5 to 25 years.
That's very interesting, because I think I was at that summit with you, and I think that you guys accomplished just that. It was so energizing. And I think that many people, especially high school teachers, were pretty humbled to be there, to be a part of something so big. And I know that a couple of them maybe are here at APA this weekend working on standard stuff, and that might have been their first. Yeah,
that was my hope.
Yeah,
I wanted to. I think ever since Charlie called me, I've been trying to pay forward what he did for me with other people, and the summit was kind of the biggest expression of that. To bring, that was really actually a key goal for our selection of participants was, what is this person's potential for contributing over the long haul, and it wasn't necessarily about age, but it was about, energy toward the work. I recognize that I'm not active in the teaching of high school psychology right now, and it is as far as doing it. I'm not a teacher in the classroom, and I teach adjunct every so often. So I know that the work needs to be passed on to others, and I really wanted the summit to be that experience that I had of somebody saying, you can do this and you should do this, and don't think small, think big, go, just like Charlie did for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to hear that it, and I'm glad to see from things like the TOPS elections, from the work with the National Standards Group, your group, that people who are at the summit are engaged in work that's going to carry us forward.
Yeah. So you were on TOPS. You were on TOPS for how long?
I was elected member at large, I think in 2002 or 2003, and then I was chair in 2005. So okay. I served a 3-year term as member at large, and then a 3-year term as chair-elect, chair, and past chair. So 6 years roughly total.
So how did the high school summit come about?
Wow.
Was it through TOPS?
No. So in 2010, I got my doctorate from the University of Alabama in Ed Psych, and that qualified me to be a full member of APA, which then somehow I was nominated to run for BEA. And so I was then elected to be on the Board of Educational Affairs, BEA, in 2013. And around that time, TOPS was kind of talking about the next steps of professional development. And I think actually Randy had the original idea that he spoke about with Emily Chesness and whoever was chair of TOPS at that time. And I'm afraid I don't remember who that is, but maybe even Kristen, about the fact that, well, we've had several summits for undergraduate education. We've had big meetings around graduate education. We've never had a meeting around high school. And so by virtue of my being connected with BEA and still kind of keeping in touch with TOPS, I said, you know what, let's propose it. Let's get it on the agenda. And so we did, and I didn't really have to do a whole lot of selling of the idea. Like, BEA went, yep, sounds like a great idea, let's do it. Okay, let's do this thing. And so
so did you all kind of approach them and say, based on success of the assessment summit, we think that this is going to work?
Well, and the Puget Sound Summit on undergraduate education, we just kind of made the case, like, look, bringing people together to attack these big issues is a more efficient way to coming up with solutions than conference calls or hoping people do it on their own. Fortunately, Diane Halpern and the Puget Sound Summit and then the SNAP Assessment Summit were so successful and productive that it really was not a hard sell. It's like, look, if you invest just a little bit of money here to bring all of us together to work through this problem of creating the best future for high school psychology, we will do that. We will come up with the ideas. We will get the minds in the room and make it happen.
I can't believe how big that thing was. And I'm using my hands and people can't see. But it was not only in numbers of people that came out to it, because how many people?
We had 70 teachers and instructors there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was just, how many strands were there?
8.
8 strands.
Yeah, that was the ridiculous part is we basically decided that we were going to have 8 conferences in one.
Yeah.
Which that's just Looney Tunes to think about, but it worked really well. Mm-hmm. I think essentially what we did was we created 8 problems for people to solve and put them in groups to solve it.
Well, and if I remember correctly, you guys had something like 15 problems to solve, and you
We
made
did.
them 8.
We did. We had to consolidate. We had to prioritize. But yeah, we just kind of identified the issues and said, okay, each group, y'all tackle this. And gosh, they delivered. They delivered above and beyond what I think I hoped for. I mean, I had this notion, and we talked about it a lot in the steering committee about let's set the agenda for high school psychology for the next 25 years. And that was like the big goal, and we were hoping small goals would be met, and oh my gosh, they delivered. And I can't credit the people who were there enough, the steering committee enough, Emily Chesness enough, everybody just stepped up and delivered. And I'm so grateful to have been a part of it.
Yeah. Now that work is still going on.
Yes.
Are you still involved with that?
Well, I am an ex officio member of the revision committee for the national standards. I was the chair of the last committee, so I'm working with that group to have the institutional history knowledge and to to bring my gained expertise in curriculum development, on that more district level to the table. So that's kind of where I'm contributing right now, and then I also I've just finished another partial term on BEA, and then now as STP president, I'm thinking through professional learning opportunities and things that STP can partner with APA on. Sue Franz has started some of that work. Rick Miller, who's going to be the president next year, is thinking about that work. So we're coordinating and talking with Emily's office and Robin's office about that.
As you're mentioning these people, I'm just thinking to myself, the strength of high school psychology in STP now is really significant.
Oh, yeah.
And it's only going to grow, especially with you at the head of it.
Well, I hope so. We don't reach a lot of high school teachers as members. They're not like official members, I think. And so some of that is part of my goal. And actually Rick Miller has a stated initiative around increasing membership and opportunities for high school teachers. High school teachers tend to not think about national involvement or help that national organizations can provide them. They look more locally for that support. And so it has been kind of a lifelong drive and in a current focus to help those teachers realize that support for high school psychology is not in their town or in their district necessarily. They have a community. We're just in cyberspace, or we're at a conference or a workshop that they need to come attend. So my hope is that we can kind of increase membership participation with high school teachers in STP and help them see that there's plenty of stuff out there for them to use to teach psychology well, and we can be that community for them that they don't have anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. So we only have a few minutes left, but I do have a couple questions for you, and they'll probably seem random because I'm going to go through some of the things that we've talked about already. But you mentioned getting your PhD in Ed Psych. So how did that decision come about for you to do that, and how has it benefited you?
I had a research idea I wanted to do, and if I was going to do all that work to do the research, I wanted to get something out of it at the end. So through my work with positive psychology, I became very interested in explanatory style and its effect on teaching and learning. And so I really came to the belief that the way a teacher explains good and bad events in the classroom matters in what type of instructional strategies they choose to use and whether they persist with students over time who struggle. So I had ideas about how to research that, and I thought, well, heck, if I'm going to do all that work to do a research study, why don't I get a doctorate at the end? So Alabama had a program in Ed Psych, and I thought, well, this marries the two things I love, education and psychology. I'm just going to go do that. So I did it, and it was hard, as a full-time teacher, a mom, and a student at an R1 institution. I took all 7 years to get that doctorate, but it's been very helpful in helping me help teachers do their jobs smarter, not harder. Mm-hmm. And I get a pay bump. And I will say that in the K-12 world, having a doctorate kind of gives you this credibility that may or may not be deserved, but is there. It people tend to think you know things because you have the letters, and so that can be helpful if I'm trying to. I guess I don't have to work as hard to establish my credibility. I don't have to go through my story. I can just say, "Hello, I'm Dr. Fineburg," and they go, "Oh, okay," and they don't all listen, but it tends to present that credential that people respect.
I hear you. I mean, you do have the knowledge and the experience, but if you can, if that gives you a louder voice to
society
get things done,
recognizes the credential.
There
so
you go.
I thought, I should probably get that. I should probably walk out with that at some point. So
well, that's great. And did your research turn out well for you?
It did.
Uh-huh.
I created a teacher's explanatory style measure, attributional style questionnaire that had teaching specific scenarios. I did structural equation modeling. I probably couldn't do that again by myself if I tried, but I did it for my doctorate, and I was able to show that explanatory style was a mediating variable between teacher sense of efficacy and burnout. So the teachers who, regardless of their sense of efficacy, if they had a more pessimistic explanatory style, then they were more likely to burn out. So it was, it was validating, I think, to what I thought.
I'm going to chew on that.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. At some point, you get involved in Society for the Teaching of Psychology. Mm-hmm. What are all the jobs you've had?
Oh, goodness.
With STP?
So I think I joined in last century in the late 90s. And let's see, I was teaching awards chair. And then I was vice president. I'm just completing my term as vice president of awards and recognitions, and I'll be president-elect starting January 1. I've served on a couple of task forces here and there. Yeah.
And what has that work been like? What's it been like to be involved in STP?
It's been very rewarding in that I will say that psychology is unique among the disciplines in that the collegiate faculty do not treat the high school faculty as less than. My English colleagues don't have that. My math colleagues, even my other colleagues in the other social studies like history, when high school teachers come to the table, with our collegiate colleagues, they treat us as equals. And so to me, that has just truly been the most rewarding part of working with STP, is that I can interact and mingle with professional psychologists, who are teaching and working in the field, and they don't see me as any different. I'm teaching psychology just like they're teaching psychology. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing that other people just don't get. And so when I talk to high school teachers, I'm like, no, really, I know there's a lot of undergrad and collegiate professors in STP, but you are just as welcome to the table, and you should come on and see what we do. And people report back that that's exactly what happens.
That's great. Do you already know, we're a year away from you kind of thinking through your initiatives and stuff, but do you have anything that's kicking around in your mind that you want to?
Yeah. I've got some ideas that still need a lot of work. Our membership in STP is not as diverse as it could be. We're about 62% identified white. I would like to reach out to institutions that serve minority students and reach out to faculty at those institutions, like HBCUs, Native American institutions, Hispanic. I don't know if there are specific Hispanic designated institutions or not. Associations for minority psychologists, and see what we need to be doing better to reach out to faculty at those institutions, to bring diverse voices to the table. I think too often, though, we address diversity in terms of just a numbers game. We need to up our numbers. And what I want to help make sure this initiative does is see diversity as a good for the society, that having diverse voices at the table makes us a better organization. So how can we engage, people of color or other, minority groups in a way that makes them, that validates them and makes them feel like that they are contributing to the society and making us better, and that we, those of us who are in the majority in the society are receiving that in ways that validate that strength. I'm also thinking about graduate students and how we've consistently had issues with them not being able to, not really getting the training that they need to teach well, especially in college. So what can we do to help that? Is that a summer workshop experience? Is that a ongoing online learning? I don't know. But talking with people who are thinking in that way. And then also just making sure that our products and services are accessible to a wide range of people, people with disabilities, but also working families. Do we welcome, people who have maybe economic disadvantage, to be, from institutions that don't provide support? How are we helping? I just want to make sure that STP is accessible.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about these things. I'm going over STP presidents in my head, past presidents who are all amazing folks. But you definitely have a unique position and history where you're not a part of higher ed right now.
Right.
You've been a part of high school for a long time, teacher training. You live in a place that has to deal with a lot of these kinds of questions. Right. So these are a lot of the conversations you're having. And so I feel like what you're going to bring to STP is something kind of unique, a different perspective. And so I'm really looking forward to that as you work that out. I hope that was all sounded like it was leading to some sort of compliment, because that's what it was supposed to be.
They can't see me, but I'm blushing.
Oh,
so.
Good. So I'm looking forward to that. That's great. And we're over time, and that means that we had a really great chat.
Good.
Thanks for sitting down.
No, thank you.
And I'm looking forward to hanging out this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for all the work you and Eric do to engage this is really helping people hear the different stories and maybe consider that TOPS or STP or APA is a place where they can belong. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thanks. And in a year, we'll get you back on here with your presidential initiatives.
Okay,
How's that
sounds
sound?
good.
And,
Sounds good.
And we'll change the teaching of psychology for the better.
I love it.